Everybody, it's Mike Jeff for Chicago Jazz Magazine, chicagojazz.com, and welcome to another episode of Around Town with Chicago Jazz. And on this episode, vocalist Paul Marinaro is with us, a good friend of Chicago Jazz Magazine, a good friend of mine, and he has got an incredible project coming out, not quite yet, the new release dropping October 28th, and then he's got a album release concert November 4th at the Studebaker right downtown. It's in the Fine Arts Building, by the way, fineartsbuilding.com for tickets. We're going to talk all about this. This is not your standard, jazz recording. This is a major recording project, and we're going to talk all about, he's got the Kaya string quartet. He's got a 6, 7, 8-piece horn section with him, a rhythm section, and the tune selection that he's got on this recording is meaningful to him, and we're going to find out all about that. So Paul, how are you? And congratulations, and it's good to see that you're already at the Studebaker waiting for people to
well, I'm great, and I'm actually not at the Studebaker. It's just fancy digital technology. I can change the background. I'll switch it up as the interview goes along. But yes, that is full Studebaker, newly restored.
Yeah.
120, I think last week, 124 years. Their 124th anniversary. So we're one of the few first performances back in the space. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
I'm glad, first of all, I'm glad they redid the space, because the location of the Studebaker Theater, which is in the Fine Arts Building, which is 410 South Michigan Avenue, is centralized right in Chicago. So it makes it for a perfect spot for people to be able to come and see a show. Also, it's not a small club, but it's also not a massive theater like the Auditorium Theater. So you still get that intimacy, which your music really, I think, requires, if you really want to get a full feel, so it was about 640, I think we were talking before we came on. So that's a good size room with good acoustics. Now they redid the sound, they redid the lights, and I'm sure that's probably why you decided to do your release event there, because first of all, you have a lot of musicians, so you can't do this in a small club. Number one. But number two, to have a historic building that you have this release in, and also reading through your liner notes and stuff, it's kind of like a historic, kind of like a kind of a throwback sound in some cases with some of the tunes that you've selected. So it's almost the perfect atmosphere that you're going to create at this album release, right?
Yeah, I had never, like many people I'm finding in Chicago, they've heard of it, but no one remembers attending anything at the Studebaker, and that's because a large part of their history in the last couple decades, it was a movie theater for a while. It was dormant for a long time. Plans for restoration had been started and then stopped, and obviously the world stopped for the pandemic. And that was, ironically, that's when they actually got the bulk of the work done, was during the pandemic. But my first time in the Studebaker was, I believe, 2018, when I did the Sinatra at the Sands concert with the CJO. We actually did that twice. We did it right out of the pandemic as well. But the first time, I just walked in, and I'm a huge architecture nut, and I just love history. I love old history, and just walking into that space and being in the Fine Arts Building, you feel the ghosts. They're in the walls. They're part of the ambiance. You can't remove the history from a building like that. You have to kind of stop and take notice of it. So I instantly fell in love with the space. At that point in 2018, it was a little rough around the edges. There was, a little dusty. As you said, the sound and lighting was not where it needed to be. But all of that, they have done a remarkable job bringing the space into its next 124 years. So it was my first choice. Obviously, it's larger than a CD release typically would need. The space is wonderful, but there's a lot of seats, so we're going to need a lot of butts in those seats. But once I realized, we went back and forth. They have a great plan for the future. They really want this to be utilized by local artists, and kind of have it be known in Chicago again as the gem it is and had been. So we're really excited to be doing it there.
I was the first time I was in it, I think I saw you playing with the CJO when you guys did the live bands thing. I hadn't been in there, and I'm so happy that they're redoing it because, you know, it's so centrally located down there, and there is not a theater that still has that intimate feel in the proximity of downtown Chicago, because you're always in the larger theaters. So let's talk a little bit though, because this recording, you could not do this in a small club if you're going to have everyone that is on the recording, which you are, performing for this. I mean, what is there? There's 14 tracks, I think I saw, right? And
14 tracks.
And you've got, you know, pretty close to your regular rhythm section that I've seen you perform with a lot, Mike Alamana, Tom Veitz's, John Tate, and George Flutis. But then you also have horns, right? You have a 6-7 piece horn section with.
Well, it's actually it's a 4-piece horn section with some tracks have the addition of a flute.
Okay.
Jim Gallaretto is an addition on the flute, and Rajiv Halim is an addition for clarinet. But other than that, it's a pretty much a 4-piece horn section. So we have Chris Madsen, Greg Ward, Raphael Crawford, and Marcus Carroll. And then the other ones come on for different sections.
Got it. Well, and then
you also have the Kaya String Quartet. So
yeah, I was going to say, then you have the Kaya String Quartet. So I mean, the venue that you have, the Studebaker Theater, of course, fineartsbuilding.com for tickets, but Studebaker Theater, 410 South Michigan Avenue. This is the perfect venue because you're going to have all of these people. Now, are you going to play this recording straight down during this show?
Our plan is to do the album in its entirety. So we have everyone in, including 2 backup singers, Alyssa Allgood and Sarah Marie Young is on the recording. She was not available for this date, so we actually have Mike Alamana's daughter, Gabriella. Yeah. Alamana is going to step in for that role, the soprano role. So yeah, it's quite a big group of people to schedule. So we're all good. Yeah, we needed that space. We really needed the space. We didn't want to, you know, pack them in tightly, just to kind of let the musicians breathe on the space and let it ring throughout that beautiful space.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the recording. So there's tracks on here, and I see a lot of classic tracks, but I think there's a David Bowie track on here, and there's different tracks like that. So let's talk a little bit about the process. How did this whole recording come about? Because this had to be something that you've been working on for years. And this isn't something that you put together real quickly, because I mean, just thinking about the selection of the tunes, but then also you have to arrange all the music for these types of things and everything else. So talk a little bit about how the process got started.
Well, yeah, it was kind of it kind of has been gestating for many years. After I was very late to the recording game, even when I did my first album 9 years ago, Without a Song, which was kind of a perfect entrance for me because it also went back to the past and was an homage and a tribute to my father, and you know, his lost dreams in music and kind of picking up where he had left off and honoring that. That did quite well, and did a live album in 2015 after that. And there were a lot of other albums planned. And you know, everything in this business is about somehow tapping into the momentum that you're able to create. And if you do create momentum, you want to ride it. You want to see where that can take you and keep going with it. Unfortunately, I had many different things that have happened since that time that just would kind of stop me in my tracks, and I'd have to regroup. Largely, the end of 2017, Christmas of 2017, I got quite ill, and most of 2018 was spent having surgeries and recovering. So I was kind of knocked out at a really inopportune time. And at that time, you know, that was the first time I had ever taken a pause. You know, when you're in this business, you just keep going. You keep taking gigs and you lose track of time sometimes because you just follow that momentum. But that was the first time I really took a pause and was worried that, can I come back? Like, you know, you take a year off, you lose gigs, you lose that momentum. Will people care who I am anymore? You know, these things when you're stopped with nothing to do but lay in a bed for much of 2018. Those are the thoughts I had. So I worked really hard to get better, to get back in shape. And 2019 was probably my biggest year that I had had. It was really kind of a comeback year for me. So we had talked about getting back into the studio and recording, and I'd gone to Europe. I was doing different gone to Europe, doing different tours, and everything seemed great. And then, of course, 2020, the
Right.
pandemic. And it was that, gigantic pause again that we all got stuck in, and at that time, being in the pandemic, looking back on it now, we know how long there was a gigantic swath of time that we all just had no idea. But when we were in it, we didn't know, is it going to be another 2 weeks, another month, another 2 months? No one knew. We'd be well into 2 years and still worrying about it. So when it came time, when we saw that a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel, Mike and I, regrouped, and I said, once we get out of this, I have to get back into the studio. I have to record. And you can't go through something like that collectively and individually, something like the pandemic, and not come out different. You have to be affected by that. If you weren't paying attention, you weren't involved. And it was interesting for me because many of the songs that we had planned prior to record, I wondered what they meant now. Did they have the same meaning? The stuff that were the songs that were working really well in live performances that we had done, that I had planned to record, I questioned, after the pandemic, like, I don't know, is this where I'm at right now? Where am I? As we went through all of that, and I analyzed the songs and we added songs to it, the concept kind of germinated and took place. And it was all about being stuck in limbo, being paused, whether it was, 4 years ago when I was sick, canceled opportunities, the pandemic, where we were all in this limbo. And that kind of spoke to me. And there was a David Bowie song that he had recorded and wanted released after he died. And it was called No Plan. And it was this song I just remember hearing shortly after he had passed that just grabbed me. And it's all about being stuck in limbo, being in a place you're neither here nor there. I think for him, it was about the limbo of the afterlife that he was speaking of. The way I read it, it was just being in this pause. So it was reflective. It was trying to look to the future, but you're stuck in your tracks. And there was the refrain of the song, the chorus of the song, it has a lyric that says, here I am, this is not quite yet. And I loved that statement. I loved that idea. And that's kind of how I built the album. It was around that idea of being consistently being stopped and paused. And then, the songs that we had talked about prior suddenly took on a different meaning than they had, maybe 2 years before that. Looking for love. It's the same. Those are timeless themes, but how are they colored by this mood of being in limbo? So I think the themes of many of the songs may be common. How we shaped them and the arrangements that Mike came up with are colored by the experience that we all went through. So that it kind of is all in there. It doesn't hit anybody over the head, beating the pandemic themes and loneliness and all that, but it's kind of all the subtext of there, and it's certainly in the brilliant writing that Mike did. It's really exceptional.
You brought up the point about the pandemic and about leading into the pandemic, and you had your big year, and I think this happened to a lot of artists, and you made a plus out of it. Some artists didn't make a plus out of it. They for good reason. I mean, obviously, but when you are going from gig to gig to gig to gig and playing and playing and playing and playing, it's really difficult to sit down and actually formulate cohesively a project like this. You know what I mean? I mean, you could slap a bunch of tunes together and put a bunch of things together and it would sound great, but the deeper meaning of this, sometimes having that pause like the pandemic where nobody could go anywhere, you couldn't go out, gave you a chance and gave a lot of artists, I think, a chance to kind of reflect on what they've been doing, what they want to do, where they want to go. And that, to me, what you just talked about makes total sense with how you describe this recording, because it's almost like this recording, the way it is, probably could never have happened the way it is if you didn't have that pause and went on, just stop, because you had all this time to reflect and really think. And that really, I think, helped a lot of artists that are able now, that are doing stuff because of what they did during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it was incredibly difficult, to have that much time and to think, my God, what have I done with my life? Is this coming back? Are any clubs going to be there? Who's going to show up to gigs? I mean, those questions were really difficult for artists in particular. Everyone, individually had their own difficult time with the pandemic, but artists really had to question not only their income and their job, but who they were, who they are, because this is not just a job for us, it's who we are as human beings. And when that's all stripped away, you have to really do a lot of soul searching, like what was this all for up until this point, and will it come back? As far as recording, I may have done most, if not all, of these songs 2 years ago. They wouldn't have been with these arrangements, and they wouldn't have been from this perspective. The songs, and that was the final key that made it all come together for me. Like, at first I thought, well, there's a song like Taking a Chance on Love, which has been a favorite of ours, and we always wanted to record it after we had started doing it live. Yeah. Initially, during the pandemic, when we had talked about this, I thought, well, who sings about looking for love or starting new love or taking a chance on new love when the world's upside down? And at first I didn't understand that. I didn't get why I would sing about that, but then it was very clear to me that that's exactly what we all are going to do. We want to rebuild, we're going to start again, but it's colored from a different perspective. It has to be. The politics, what we've all gone through in the last 6 years, like the division that we've all felt with family members or friends and just the country, all of that has to affect us. And I think it finds its way into the art that you create. And again, it's not hitting anyone over the head with those messages constantly in every song, but it's certainly colored the mood and the overall idea of the project.
Talk a little bit about Mike Alamano. Is he the musical director on this and produced it too? Did he produce it as well?
Mike and I produced, and also co-produced with Jim Galleretto. Okay. Who came on and helped us. Jim and I had been working on a different project to be released soon, which was a lot, but it was a great problem to have. Several different projects kind of just said, let's do it now. Mm-hmm. But Mike and I had been working together. He's been my main guy as far as musical director for many years now, and we had always wanted to do something together. And then when we had this opportunity for this album, Mike's wonderful to work with because he had different styles that he's capable of, and it's his own wonderful project that he just did, Vonology. You can hear the ideas that he's capable of and the direction that he can go in. What I love about working with Mike for me is that he knows intrinsically what I like to do. He knows where I like to create. He knows my strengths. He knows my weaknesses as a musician, and he doesn't lose his own vision, but he knows how to create within mine. So it pushes me in a different direction in a bit, without losing the core of who I am as a singer. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But I don't recall ever bringing an idea to Mike, even the Bowie stuff. There's a lot of jazz musicians that if you go to them and say, hey, I want to do a David Bowie song, they would immediately leave the room or say, you're out of your mind. Why would you want to do that? Leave that alone. Mike was always open to it.
Yeah.
Even if maybe privately he wondered, I'm not quite sure where he's going with this, but he trusted me enough to say, hey, if you hear something there, let's find it. And he has always done that with every song that I'll bring to him. He said, okay, let's sit down and let's work on it together. Let's find, the core of what you're hearing here and where we can take it. So yeah, Mike did all of the arrangements. I believe it's the first time he had ever written for strings, and written for a big group like this. So yeah, it was a lot. And mind you, we're doing this as we're uncertain how long the pandemic's going to last. People were bailing because they had gotten COVID.
Sure.
So it was really stressful. And I also would like to say, Mike was doing this as he was working on his doctorate. Mike was working on this as he was finishing the Vonology, his major release on his own. And never once did I feel as if this was taking backstage of his other projects. When Mike shows up, he's there for your gig. And he's always present and in the moment. And I think that's probably lessons he learned with Von Freeman, and that he carries on now. So it's been a great working experience together. Personally, I don't care for him that much, but
nobody really does. He's just really no, he's a great guy. And for him to be able to write, I mean, obviously the Vonology, they just premiered it. I don't know if it was a premiere, but they just performed it at the Jazz Fest, Chicago Jazz Fest. And I know when I saw him a couple of months ago, he was telling me about this recording project with you. And he was very excited about the whole thing. So, I mean, I can't wait to hear the entire recording in whole, because right now you're dropping out singles. So you've dropped a couple of singles. By the time this episode drops, you're just going to be dropping it, I believe, today, which would be the Friday that it's coming out. So talk about the recording that's coming out this Friday, because you're trickling out a couple of singles. And then, of course, the big one comes out October 28th when everybody can get the release. And then November 4th at the Studebaker at 8 p.m., you can see the entire performance, the entire album performed live right there at the Studebaker. So talk about a couple of the releases that are out. And I'm assuming everybody should go over to paulmarinaro.com to get the releases and sign up for your mailing list and all that if they aren't already on it.
Sure. Yeah. The first one we dropped was, I think, September 16th. So just a couple weeks ago, we dropped Born to Be Blue, which, typically that song is done as a ballad, or, kind of just in that vein. And a lot of people, when they saw just the title that I was releasing a single, they're like, oh, this is going to be beautiful and really heartfelt. And it's not. It's a really kind of jolt. It's a great arrangement. Mike really knocks it out of the park. That's with the horn section and the rhythm section on that. And I say this about every song, but it really is a joy to sing. I love singing that arrangement. We've got really great response from that. And, it's different. I think the fan base that I has been so wonderfully supportive here in Chicago, and in those who I have been able to meet and sing for, throughout the country, but particularly here in Chicago. But what's interesting is, if you talk to so many different fans, they all have a different idea a little bit of what I do or who I am as a singer. There is a portion that would love me to sing their favorite 10 Sinatra songs, which is really not what I've ever done, but I carry that. And hey, it's a compliment. There's, no one better than Sinatra in my estimation. That was the top, but I've never really wanted to go and do Sinatra shows, even though we did the Sinatra at the Sands. But hey, if you have a chance to sing the original orchestrations with the full orchestra, you take it. But
Absolutely.
anyway, this is really different. These tracks are really different from anything I've done, particularly Born to Be Blue. While that might have been a song that I would have done, this arrangement is it's very new. And it's definitely a new direction. So I'm loving the feedback. It's been really good. The next one, Friday, October 7th, is one of the 2 David Bowie tracks that are on the album. And this one is 5:15, The Angels Have Gone. It features the rhythm section, plus the Kaya String Quartet, and also Alyssa Allgood singing backup, and Sarah Marie Young singing backup. So it's really different. We had done, I think it was my first birthday after being sick. It was the first time I had come back. So it was 2018. I think that July it was one of the first shows back that I was able to perform. And, the country was upside down. Relationships had been strained because of politics. It was ugly. And I think uglier than any of us were ever remembered. It was unprecedented, the amount of just how low it had gotten, and unfortunately still is. And I heard, I was aware of this Bowie song. It's from 2001, from his album Heathen, and I'd always loved the song, but I heard it with different ears. His lyrics are different for me to interpret because, unlike Cole Porter or Johnny Mercer, his are a little out there. He's never writing direct. It's a little esoteric. You need to kind of dig and fill in the picture. And this one is in that vein. However, there's something about it that I knew exactly what it meant for me. And to me, it was a statement about feeling that division and being in that divide, and, looking to your past and choosing what you're going to bring from it into the future, and choosing what you need to leave behind. And it's that definitive moment where, and the allegory in the song is about getting on a different train and taking a different track. I need to leave. This isn't working for me anymore. And there was just a lot of, that personal turmoil of change that we all felt, whether it was with my own family and friends, or just what we had gone through collectively as well. It really seemed to speak to that. And we did it. I've only performed it twice, at both times at Winters with the backup singers. But at that point, Mike had not written the arrangement for strings. So when I wanted to record it, he kind of expanded it, added the strings, and completed the backup vocal parts. So it was always the plan to have that on the album, and the theme is perfect. It kind of just fits right in there, even though stylistically it's very different from anything I've done. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
Okay, so that's actually dropping today, which is when this is actually dropping. So everybody can go over to paulmarinaro.com and sign up for his mailing list, first and foremost, if you're not already on there. And then second of all, get the track, check it out. And the entire album, as we've already said, releases October 28th. Before we wrap this whole thing up, obviously the show coming up November 4th at the Studebaker Theater, 410 South Michigan Avenue. Tickets available at fineartsbuilding.com. I'm curious because, now after the pandemic and releasing a recording like this, you're dripping out a couple of tunes in advance. And, obviously with the streaming and all that stuff, I know that you're probably going to have vinyl, I would imagine, for this, which is going to be, it just adds such a warmer sound to everything. So I'm glad that's really taking off and coming back. But I mean, what are some of the challenges right now, getting the word out about the recording, and then kind of what's the next step for this? Because you put this project together and you're going to do the release show. I mean, are you going to take this on the road? Are you going to be able to do this in a smaller setting so you can get out and travel and get the music out?
Those are a lot of loaded questions.
Well, hey, that's what I'm
actually,
for,
it definitely, yeah, thanks. It definitely is coming out on vinyl, although the vinyl plants are so backed up right now it'll come out in vinyl next year. I didn't want to hold off the release to wait for vinyl. But yeah, it just, I'm old school in many ways, but particularly with, listening to music. I love the holding something. I love the tactile, the physical product. The challenge is always getting it out there, getting the word out, trying to figure out all the digital links that you need to do for streaming. I appreciate you sending people to my website. They could also go to bandcamp.com and find me on there. Bandcamp is a great platform for independent artists. They allow people to listen to the track. You can purchase it for $1. You can download it. You can, people have been generous, and you could pay more if you want. Streaming, as everybody knows, artists make next to nothing. So we're really kind of just giving this music away for streaming services. We can't fight it anymore. There's nothing we can do, but there are platforms like Bandcamp where people can offer to pay for their music. Whether it's a physical copy or digital, those crazy old days when we used to actually pay for art. As far as performing it, the Studebaker is kind of the big shot to introduce the album. We thought it was really important to perform the album as is, with all of the musicians in a setting like that. We are having it filmed, so I may release a concert version of that in the future. And then we're looking to, we've already pared down most of the arrangements where they will work with a small group, so we can still do the music to tour it. But we are hoping to find, different venues or different opportunities where we can, put together the full group. Because that's really how this music was arranged. But that's certainly a challenge because it's a big expense. So we'll see how this one goes first. Moving forward, like I said, I do have another project that will be released early next year, and that's with Jim Galleretto and the Metropolitan Jazz. I always say the MJQ, which is a different group. The
Right,
MJO.
I do the same thing, by the way. I know.
Yeah.
I do the same thing when I'm talking to Jim. I'm just like, wait a minute. He gets it all flipped around. That's an incredible group. So you're actually putting something out with them.
We already did. Yeah, that's finished. And it was ready to, both of these projects were on the finish line. When we started them, we joked and said they're probably going to be, finished at around the same time, literally down to the week on the finish line. So they actually held off the release so I can get this out first. But that's a really exciting project as well. And just picking up kind of where I left off and seeing what we can do with this and get back out there. And this was, I'm really blessed to have this opportunity to work with these arrangements, with Mike's arrangements, Jim helping us out producing, and just, as you said, you read through the list of musicians, and it's kind of a who's who of great Chicago players. And I have to say that the sessions we started recording in right around Christmas of last year, 2021.
Okay.
That's when we went into CRC. We had a great recording engineer, Matt Lejeune, and the atmosphere in the studio was just euphoric. Everyone was we were nervous because it was kind of right as COVID was peaking again.
Yeah, everything was shutting down in January of last year again. I mean,
exactly.
You look back, it's not that long ago. Everything was like stopped.
Had we waited one more week, we would never have recorded it. It would have been put on pause because everybody that was involved one by one started, getting sick or was exposed, and that waiting period.
Right.
But being in the studio with everyone, we were just, it was such a joy because everyone was so grateful to be making music and to be together. And that's really the only way for me to make music is in those kind of atmospheres. So I was really fortunate and really blessed to do it when we did. So, well,
CRC's a legendary recording studio. I mean, and they have the bigger rooms and the smaller rooms. And I mean, it's just such a great quality space. So I know the recording is going to sound just that way too. And and a lot of people don't realize, you're getting the recording together. You guys had to rehearse at some level, right? I mean, just getting all of these people together to rehearse had to be just, and during COVID had to be like another level of heavy lift in there to get this whole thing put together just to rehearse it.
Yeah, it was I'm getting the sweats just thinking about it. It was a lot. It was a lot of moving parts, and we just never knew from day to day, from hour to hour. I would be checking email at midnight and getting, Rajiv Halim had to bail. We got him on one track playing clarinet, but he was supposed to be doubling for the entire album, and he got COVID.
Oh.
So he, unfortunately, he couldn't be on the project. There was nothing we could do. I couldn't risk pausing for a week because we had no idea what was going to happen. So
yeah,
a lot of moving parts. And, another great thing, we both realized, like, Mike and I were so close to this music, and Mike really wanted to concentrate on leading his arrangements. So to have Jim come in, and he's such a great guy, incredible musician, but he was that wonderful calming presence as producer in the booth with the sound guys. So we had every angle covered, and it was just a great way to make music.
There's a lot of levels to the recording process, and we're not going to have time to talk about it now, but
it's not.
The number one key is to get the right people playing, all like-minded, and then have the right person producing. And Jim and Mike and yourself, I mean, you guys are all level-headed, calm, and you can get through things and make suggestions, and everybody probably takes those suggestions in, and that's what actually puts out the best kind of a recording.
Yeah, and one thing is, I've learned from the old pros, and being lucky enough to be privy to some of the old masters, and who became friends of mine. You trust your gut and trust your own. You have to be confident in what you know how to do. But I think maybe even a bigger part of the process is knowing when to let other people put them in charge and trust them, who may have had more experience than you. So I'm pretty stubborn about what I want. But a good way to balance that out is saying, I know what I want. That's why I have Mike there. That's why Jim is there. That's why Matt is in the engineer booth. And I'm letting them do what they're good at, so I can do what I'm good at, singing into the microphone. So it was past experiences. I probably took a bit more, I got a little bit more nervous about that process because I was trying to micromanage, and I didn't need to with those guys involved. I didn't need to do that. I was able to focus on my role, within, of course, I always, if I had a problem with something, we would easily discuss it, but no, let the pros do what they know how to do.
That's the hardest part, to let it go. But you have to focus as a musician. You have to focus when you're in. You can't be worrying about who's where, what's going on. Is this guy showing up for the next rehearsal or any of that, or next session, next recording thing. I mean, you got to focus on what you're doing, and that's the key. Yeah. That's how you put out the best product. So, all right, not quite yet. October 28th is the release, paulmarinaro.com. We'll link everything up down below. Of course, Studebaker Theater, November 4th, 8 p.m., 410 South Michigan Avenue. Easy parking. There's valet around the corner. You can even park down there, across the street, down in the Grant Park, Millennium Park garage. Walk across the street. Everything. Paul's making it so simple for you. It's ridiculous. So
really, and for people who haven't been in the Studebaker in many years, or if you've never been in there, it really is a gem, and I'm excited for them. It's a great opportunity for people like myself, artists here in Chicago. The space is really it should be utilized. So this is a great opportunity for people to kind of be present in there and see it for what for the potential that it has. And it really is like stepping back in time a little bit. It's a magnificent space.
It is. And Paul keeps changing his background. So now he's back.
I'm back at Studebaker.
All right, man. I appreciate you being on. Of course, everybody go to fineartsbuilding.com to get those tickets. And looking forward to November 4th and coming out and seeing the show. And congratulations.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
what an undertaking. I'm glad you got it out. And then I'm sure we'll schedule another time to have you on for the next project, which is
I'd
coming
love
up very
to.
soon.
Yeah, it's coming up. So
It's awesome. All right. So everybody head over to paulmarinaro.com, get all the information, November 4th, Studebaker. And of course, all things Chicago Jazz on chicagojazz.com. And thank you for watching. And as I always say, hopefully I will see all of you somewhere out on the scene.
preferably November 4th.